everyone. I'm Meetali. I'm an architect from Delhi, India, currently doing a master's course in World Heritage Studies from Brandenburg University of Technology, which is in Cottbus, Germany. Today, I'm here to present a research on the topic Whose Heritage? The Role of Communities in Living Heritage, which is a case of Baolis in India. And I will try to raise questions of power and management of these historic structures, which are actually fast diminishing in the Indian context. I begin with giving a context about what a Baoli is. A Baoli, also known as Bawri, is a traditional stepwell. These are found all over India, but especially in the arid regions where availability of water is scarce. With time, these step structures evolved to be architectural marvels depicting a particular era in history and became a community space for holding rituals, ceremonies, and social congregations. So with the help of the upcoming slides, I will now highlight the problem which is associated with these structures, some positive initiatives which have already been taken by the organizations to protect these, and elaborate on key concerns through some case studies. So what is the need of this particular research? The Baolis, which were once of immense significance for water management and community as a whole, are losing their traditional role as a water management system, because we know that the new technology is taking over and now we have piped systems for water transportation. Nonetheless, they do represent the history, the identity, and the architectural marvel of a place which today is threatened due to lack of awareness and urbanization. Lastly, also due to negligence, these structures have become dumping grounds in many areas, depicting loss of sense of belonging amongst the community. However, there have been some positive initiatives which understood awareness as the key to approach the problem. This involves a Chicago-based journalist, Victoria Lotman. She basically searched and mapped all the Baolis in India. We did have a lecture by Victoria, and she's written a wonderful book on Baolis, where she explores this particular heritage and maps them in different parts of the India, especially the ones which have been neglected by the people. And this effort of hers has helped in a lot of states to bring the state government in the loop of helping out in the conservation and management process of these Baolis. Another initiative was also taken by INTAC, which is the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, to map these Baolis, particularly in Delhi. And you can have a look at them at the Google Arts and Culture exhibition, and the live exhibition also took place near Lodi Road in Delhi. So moving on to the case studies, for the purpose of this research, I will use three types of examples, namely Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli in Delhi, India, Rani Ki Vav, which is a World Heritage Site in Gujarat, and some of the lost Baolis, which come under the category of underrepresented heritage. The aspects on which these examples differ are their international status, community involvement, and power dynamics. The Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli is not a World Heritage Site, but Rani Ki Vav is. However, the Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli is located near the World Heritage Site of Humayun's tomb, which was inscribed in 1993. The Urban Regeneration Initiative was taken near the Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli by Aga Khan Trust for Culture, and it pays particular attention to community involvement. Whereas Rani Ki Vav, though being a World Heritage Site, secludes the community in the entire process. There is, however, a third category, as mentioned before, which considers the collection of Baolis, some of which are unknown and are losing their significance. In this case, we talk about authority in terms of who should take care of this heritage and why. So I go on to the first example, which is Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli. This Baoli is located near the World Heritage Site of Humayun's tomb, which is depicted in the picture on the right, and was inscribed in the World Heritage List in 1993. Here, there were multiple stakeholders who came together to propose an urban regeneration project. The map in the middle was a proposed boundary modification document, which was submitted by Archaeological Survey of India to UNESCO. And the red spot on this map is where the current Baoli in question is. It was proposed that this Baoli should be added to the buffer zone of this particular already inscribed World Heritage Site, which also tells us about the management process and how well community involvement was included in the entire process, because if the stakeholders are able to propose such a site and then expand its boundary, it means that they're not only well-funded, but they have also involved or gone beyond what was already asked for them during inscription. This slide shows screenshots from the website, which was developed by Aga Khan Trust for Culture to showcase the urban regeneration initiative. The image on the left shows the condition of this Baoli before it was conserved, as opposed to the image on the right. Here, the authorities worked with the local community to make them aware about the significance of the Baoli. And as a result, the residents agreed to push back the projections of these new concrete homes, which were becoming a threat to the stability of the structure itself. This urban regeneration project paid attention to people-centric approaches and focused on involving community in each step it took. Here, as you can see, they have gone beyond conservation to a model of urban conservation through urban improvements and providing safe, positive spaces for community use. However, it is a question of who has the authority. Baoli, a community space, historically belonged to the community. Though in the example, as you have already seen, Aga Khan Trust for Culture raised awareness about its lost significance. But would this be considered a hegemonic or heterogenic process? The next example is of Rani Ki Vav, which is a World Heritage Site itself and was inscribed in 2014 under criteria 1 and 4 in the World Heritage List. It stands as an example of artistic architectural mastery achieved at a stage of human development when water was sourced from groundwater streams through wells. The picture on the right bottom shows a top view of this Baoli with a front view on the above picture, as you can see here. Though a World Heritage Site, Rani Ki Vav has a fixed boundary and a buffer zone. It might be a very famous tourist spot today in India, but there is no functional use to this built structure and a built heritage, where community seems to be secluded physically because the community which is nearby this Baoli cannot even visit it properly because A, there is no function, and B, even if you visit, it's generally filled with tourists. This makes one wonder that if the World Heritage status and the need to power involve such a tedious process, in order to conserve and manage this Baoli, who was it who has the power and who is it who should be involved in making the decisions of conservation and management? This approach, when there is a World Heritage property in question, thus comes across a hegemonic one, where the sole purpose becomes to maintain the status. So while the previous examples were focusing on Baolis, which have been looked into from conservation and management perspective before, there are many which lie without any attention. On the left, in the black square, you can see protected Baolis in contrast to the ones on the right, which are rapidly diminishing. These protected Baolis are under this national list of protection for heritage monuments. Victoria Lotman puts it aptly when she says, nobody used these anyway, or it's been lying abandoned for so many years that nobody will notice that it's gone. In such a scenario, there is no doubt that level of authority is needed. However, should this be the community itself or the state? All of these above examples that I have shown before finally culminate on the main question of whose heritage is it that we are talking about? Who should have a say in what happens, and can reviving, revitalizing, regeneration be a step forward towards it? So
Oops. Hi, perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was really enlightening and a great, I think you did a great way of concisely like summing up kind of the situation. So I guess maybe first off, before diving into group questions are you from India? What is there specific connections that you have to these places? Do you have because you're talking about community access? Did you grow up anywhere where you participated in these spaces?
So I belong to Delhi, and which is in the north of India. And most of the Baolis, because they belong to the arid regions, which is towards the west where you find the desert. So that is where they evolved the concept of wells. But in India, specifically in the north, you do find a lot of Baolis which are scattered here and there. But till I actually studied about them, it is weird that I never noticed them. And most of the community people itself, it becomes difficult when you talk to them and you realize that they are also not considering that there is a structure lying which has significance, because with time it's losing its significance. And even if you do cater to an awareness program or try to bring forward or take a step forward, again, the question of authority comes into place, because we do not have the authority to tell them if the place has significance. I think the community should be the one doing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we have a question, but was wondering if you have thoughts on how interpretation at a site might be helpful in bringing light to the heritage.
Yeah, actually, this particular question is indeed interesting, because I did connect the aspect of Baolis with one of the exercises that we did in the master's module. And interpretation, again, if I'm talking about authority, the question will still remain, because people who will interpret the site will at the end be people who are involved in heritage. They have some authority already. But when we talk about involving the community, yes, interpretation can play a role, but how it's done is what will matter. So if we are involving the community, and if we are having interpretive maybe boards, or if we are having interactive sessions on the site, and this involves interpretation at all levels, which involves different aspects for children and different aspects for people who are coming as tourists, then of course the thing I think it will prosper. But I think interpretation will still might just be a chunk of what needs to be done.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to ask. So getting with community engagement, because, I agree with you of wanting, you need to have community buy-in, and if it's not of value to a community, then, how can we deem it World Heritage or whatever the level may be? So have you seen, I don't know if you've, in these particular cases, ways that the community has successfully been engaged? You mentioned that the development of houses, they were able to work with the community, but has there been specific just means that they've gotten community engagement?
So the example that I showed of Hazrat Nizamuddin Baoli is a typical one. A, because it is not exactly a World Heritage Site, but it lies near the World Heritage Site. And B, what needs to be seen is who are the stakeholders involved. In this case, we do not have the national stakeholders. We ideally have an international one, which works on different countries. That is Aga Khan Trust for Culture. So when you have good funding, especially in AKTC, you do have good funding, it becomes easier. So I would say that there are multiple roles that each of us can play. And in today's time, we keep on going back to people-centric approaches, but one has to take care that the monetary approaches or the monetary funding part cannot be, just because the community will fund you in one of thousands cases, which I haven't seen yet. And especially when it comes to Baolis, because there is no functional use yet, you do not have the groundwater table level left. So you do not have them functioning as a well anymore. So yeah, it has to be adaptive reuse is what I think.
Yeah, well, and actually someone just was asking about that. So can they be reused for water management, or is there other ways for adaptive reuse that you see that they could be utilized?
So while there are rarely some of the Baolis which do have water left, which can also be taken as case studies to understand how they actually built them. Mostly the Baolis which are in question, which we are talking about, which are threatened, are not in a good condition, but they can be revived. So I have seen the projects where organizations like Intact, they started from scratch, and the Baoli did revive, because at the end, if the community itself, the residents nearby, they are using it as a dumping ground, then it becomes difficult. then you need people, experts, getting on ground to actually clear the dump and then raise the significance, which is a longer process as compared to the other aspects. I think vice versa approach where the community already knows about it.
And Clara was asking, you know, have there been creative uses that have you seen from them? Like she mentioned community gardens or a performance space. Yeah, have you seen anything like that?
So that's why I took the first example, because generally the Baoli traditionally was belonging to a particular community. So you have one Baoli and it is being used by the community which is living nearby. And then it became eventually with time a space where they could hold functions. And that's how the architecture aspect of the Baoli also increased. In today's time, because if the Baoli is in a context which might be urbanized today, but the space is architecturally evolved where you do not have people using it as a dumping ground yet, which means that the Baoli is not having water, but at the same time, it has not reached a level of being a garbage dump, then the creative use that they did in Nizamuddin Basti is quite possible. Because at that point of time, when you have a World Heritage status involved, they did create community gardens. They did involve the nearby spaces to actually form an urban regeneration process and a project, which actually formed a loop and interconnected everything that was already there on the site. But I do not think that a Baoli secluded from community in the urban fabric can actually be revived.
And the community, is that, is it more about physical space? So the communities that directly live around, or is it more of like a hereditary access to the space?
Actually, this is a very good question, because I had a discussion with Rohit, who is heading ECROM right now. And his concern was that in ECROM, whenever we have discussions about heritage, again and again, people bring about people-centric approaches and they talk about community without defining the community. So in my case, when I'm saying community, I should be more clear in defining who the community is. But right now, because we're not even concerned about the topic that I'm talking about, that's why the community question comes a bit later. And the community in my case and the three examples differ, because if you have a World Heritage status, then you've got tourists, then you've got people who might be living a few miles away, and you also got people who might not even know about it sometimes, despite it being a World Heritage site. On the other hand, there are things that we belonging to Delhi, for example, do not know. So that the community also will not be aware of it. So it actually depends on who your target audience is and what kind of project do you want to conduct and how you
makes sense. So Catherine had brought up just, you know, worry about the water levels. Is that I guess natural, or do you know why some of them don't have access to water? Is it like global warming and climate change, or urbanization?
Yes. So if you look at I think because coming from India, it's a bit simpler for me to think about these structures because I've seen them. But I totally understand if a person from the outside visits them as a well, which is not having water, then why do you have it? So, but there was a nomination which was done by India for the Baolis in the Deccan region, which was funded by the World Monuments Fund. And it's a very nice project, because what they have done is they have studied as to where all the water level system is still there and which Baolis can you still use to understand this water management. And in terms of why they vanished or why are they vanishing, apart from lack of awareness, the basic concern is urbanization. So you have people shifting to RCC construction, as you saw that there were projections on the structures, etc. They do not care because there's no water. Of course, climate change. And I would also say that significance of the community space, because of urbanization, you're coming into the four walls and you do not need the public space anymore. You think you do not need it. So that is why Baoli as a community space is also dying with the skyscraper kind of structures coming.
So Sue had mentioned in thinking about authority for those that are derelict, could that not be an intangible heritage associated with their original use through creating arts, events, festivals around the history and original use of the Baolis?
So I think I would link it to Devashree's question, I think, about interpretation, that as I said, and this is an issue that one has to deal with, which is the tangible and the intangible aspect. So you talk about oral history, you talk about what the significance of the Baoli used to be, and you sort of try to bring it on the ground, on the site, maybe creating exhibitions for the people and having a fundraising campaign. So it itself, because of the scale of the Baolis, where the position of the Baolis is, what its urban fabric is, will be very different. So I will not say that generally I can have this kind of an oral approach or an exhibition approach or creating a festival around it everywhere, because a lot will depend on the context of where it is.
Sorry, couldn't unmute myself. That makes sense. I think a lot of times we fall guilty of, fitting into a one-size-fit-all approach of this worked really great in this space, so let's apply it everywhere. And obviously India is incredibly diverse. There's hundreds of languages and so many microcultures. So again, the idea of community and what does community mean? Community is so unique to each community. So there's so many ways to interact.